Hey, New York, amazing. Phoenix, Belgrade, lovely. One of my best friends is from Belgrade. Fantastic. Alice, awesome. Driving from the airport. Great stuff, Annie. Montreux, fantastic. As deceiving as it looks, I'm not in the Bay Area. I'm currently in Costa Rica. Yeah, don't be fooled. Just letting in another person. Great. Well, let's kick off, I think. See, we've got Tom. Hey, Sharon.
Hi.
How's it going? Great to have you with us. Hi. If you want to drop in the chat where you're calling in from today, it's nice to see where everyone is coming in from. And we're going to kick off, which is really exciting. So, can everyone see my screen? Can see the screen? Okay, great. Well, firstly, yeah, thanks for coming in and spending some time with us today. I am one half of CultureOS, and my other half is with us today as well, Sarah Schwab, and we'll definitely make some time for an introduction and hopefully a bit of a conversation today, because there's lots to talk about, and hopefully the kind of the topic is something that not only hooked you in just because the AI words are there, but also something that I think is really has a bearing on a much larger kind of conversation that we're wanting to broach together today, which is all about culture, organizational culture, and really how humans are working, thinking, and feeling in this very new and often quite unstable and uncertain world of work. So we're wanting to kind of share some ideas with you, which has really been the genesis of CultureOS. And we'll talk today really about what that is and what our thesis, if you like, is on hopefully how to fix culture in the AI era. So yeah, really, really excited to jump in. Sarah, anything from you want to kick off with just before we go in?
No, I think you've done a very nice job, Alex. So just maybe a couple of words of introduction for me. 25 plus years in the field of management, leadership development work in big companies, small companies, run my own startup, and most recently working closely with Alex on this. I think we like to call it a movement, Alex, don't we, really? Because I don't think that we claim to have the end point, and indeed that is the point. This is such a complex, such an unknown environment. We want to come with some framing, with some smart people who will share their ideas and build on that framing for how to tackle what we believe is increasingly a large elephant in the room, which is AI scaling faster than our corporate cultures are scaling in all the right ways. And so we're going to talk a little bit about that today. So thank you so much for joining us. It's a pleasure to see you all.
And a really important part of how we've designed today's experience is to make sure that we get some time to hear everybody's voices. If you've got something to contribute, if there's some experience you'd like to share as well, we're going to have some focused questions to share with you in a little bit, so that it's not just us talking, but ultimately we're sowing the seeds of exactly what Sarah said, which is a movement, which is a community. And that's very much my background as well. So over the last sort of nearly 15 years, I've been growing different businesses, different projects around the world with a focus on community building and storytelling. So I work with executives and leaders around how to kind of find the right narrative strategy around what they're doing. And so much of that dives really nicely into the work that Sarah and I are doing, because culture really is the story of how people get things done. And we're wanting to rewire that from the inside out, which is what CultureOS really is. Great. So let's kick off. So we're going to work with a few questions today, and some of the other ones, like I said, we're going to invite some feedback on, or put you in two rooms where we can have a bit of a bigger discussion on. But really, we're kind of kicking off with this idea of the strategy of an organization's culture, no matter where you sit, whether you're in HR or leadership or marketing or operations, or maybe you're working outside the organization looking in, and kind of seeing that as the fabric of how people get things done versus something that is absolutely dominating all the headlines, all the news. It needs no introduction, artificial intelligence. And we're kind of trying to, make some sense of some of the assumptions that people are making around AI, and how we can kind of test what's really going on at an organizational level. What are leadership's priorities, and how is that affecting the world of work, the world of how people get work done, especially if, like most organizations, have a multi-generational workforce, right? You've got young people, you've got, people who are maybe towards the end of their careers, and you've got everything else in between, and how these things affect not just those individuals, but the way those individuals mix and work together. And what we've seen is that there's a big disparity between the strategy of rolling out and ultimately the investment, the money that is put behind supporting an AI strategy, enabling people with AI tools, with workflows. I know this firsthand because I'm involved in a business right now where I'm actually leading an AI rollout, an enablement rollout for a business, for an events business who do most of their work in Africa. And it's a fascinating case study because there's a lot of excitement around these tools and how it definitely can make a positive impact in making us more productive, in getting more things done, in helping us to cover areas that perhaps we wouldn't be able to. So it's definitely a force for some net good in many areas, and there's no denying it's here to stay. At the same time, we can't have blinkers on about some of the harder to count costs around what it does around our sort of livelihood and our way of how we are working and what we're doing to the relationships in the culture, the maturity levels around how a business is kind of treating its people, right? Because at the same time of all the excitement going on, a lot of the time, because of the hoopla around AI and the hoopla around exponential technologies, it's easy to feel like the technology area is getting more investment than the people area. And so that's a tension that we're trying to navigate and that we're trying to make sense of. And there's a lot of evidence around, I suppose, what people are feeling as this real tension, this paradox of AI adoption across all businesses, whether that's small scale startups right to publicly listed companies. There's a real kind of mixed message that's being sent around how AI is being not only implemented and delivered, but how it's being received. And something that Sarah and I have definitely spotted, and I've seen this once again in my own work with AI enablement, is that there's a kind of an outward narrative that people are happy to talk about because it feels like it's the safe narrative to adopt the party line. We're AI positive. We're happy to, involve ourselves with new tools and be at the forefront of the future. While internally, they might feel, there's actually a hell of a lot going on. And I'm not feeling so certain about the safety of my job, the safety of my industry or our department. And so there's a real sort of chasm to bridge when it comes to how to not just roll out AI, but how we're going to be designing and co-creating the right kind of culture for the future as well. Sarah, is anything on that framing you want to add in as we're here? Because there's so much to talk about. I'm trying to keep it short, but
I think you've done a wonderful job. I'm anxious to get to the next slide because this, I think, is some from the field information that we hear from our earliest career professionals. So our Gen Z, we run a Gen Z Voices podcast. We do keynotes with Gen Z employees around the globe. And so we're starting to see this interesting picture that Alex will show you on the next slide that really articulates this this tension that Alex, you've been referring to. So you go ahead.
So often with surveys, especially if they're done anonymously, people will tell you how they feel, and emotions almost never lie around how that internal state is coming through. And when asking some of those Gen Zs that question, when you think about AI and the future of work, what emotion comes up first, right? It's not about information, not about education, not about the landscape, but around how you feel. It's really quite interesting to see the picture that emerges pretty much right away. It doesn't mean it's a uniform picture, that it's all bad and doomsday, but it definitely gives rise to the fact that there are just quite a few unanswered questions. And especially for the Gen Zs that we've been focusing on, some of the young people coming into the workforce where they do not have yet the life experience, the ability to have a good enough sense of sort of career experience to make different judgment calls and perhaps even have the confidence to weather out the storms. It's pretty striking to see how some of these words, scared, uneasy, anxious, worried, are really jumping straight out at us. It's interesting to see that some of these are also peppered with helpful, excited, creativity as well. So it's in there, but the picture itself is muddled. And it's a kind of a good jumping off point. And I think a lot of inspiration that Sarah and I take in kind of thinking, well, how can we work with this, with the way things are right now, and start to see culture as an emergent system? And we're going to get into this in a little bit as well, rather than the way things are and how it's just a mess of people trying to get things done in a complicated environment, but rather, can that environment be curated? Can the system be understood? And can the complexity be managed so that more desirable outcomes for both the individual and the organization can be achieved? Those don't have to be mutually exclusive things. So it's really interesting to see these things come up. Sarah, anything that you wanted to add in while we're here?
I think just one other thing that I've heard quite a lot of is, unfortunately, some of the career advice that our young people are getting from, and as a parent of 20-something, 20-something myself, I've really had to work on the fact that we should not be giving career advice that pertains to a world where one's career is linear. Our young people's careers are going to be anything else but linear. And so I think there's a huge responsibility that us who are slightly on the older end of the spectrum have when guiding our early career professionals in terms of what they should be thinking about in terms of career, what mindsets, what skill sets, because otherwise you ask yourself the question, well, what should I be learning? If everything is essentially going to be replaceable by the next big LLM upgrade that comes. So I think that that scared and uneasy comes from not just what they observe themselves, but they're getting conflicting advice from people, their elders in the workforce, and that feels really challenging. But let's bring everyone else in, Alex, because I think I'm sure everyone has a perspective on this question.
That's exactly what we wanted to now turn it over to you. How are you thinking, and also how are you feeling around AI and the future of work? Is there something in that picture that is upsetting, is exciting, is cause for concern, cause for opportunity perhaps, and a way that influences how you are thinking and feeling about what's going on out there, and perhaps even in your local network or environments of work right now? Love to hear from each of you on that question. So feel free to plug some stuff in the chats, or if you want to come off mute. Yeah, Karen, please go for it.
I have think of this in terms of a concern and also an opportunity, because all of the things that you've mentioned, I've seen often myself, and I really believe that the social behavior and personal development is absolutely critical. It's always been critical, but there's a sharp need for everyone, especially as we're young and we're developing, to really invest in our own internal authority and direction, and then to be able to find alliances and support. So I'm a real believer in today we need to develop a social intelligence. And it's a very human, the more AI we get, the more we need to look more on some of the human motivations and technologies. And neuroscience has taught us a lot about this.
Beautiful. Social intelligence. Yeah, amazing. Anyone else? Feel free to come into the chat if you prefer not to speak or not able to. But yeah, I think it's really important to hear some voices on this. What's alive for you right now on that question?
Hi, I'm Sharon. I define myself as an optimist's optimist. So my perspective may not jive with a lot of people's concerns. Looking over our history as humans, we've always been innovative. We've always overcome. We've kept going through many, many iterations of our development and our progress. And I see AI as an opportunity to continue to collaborate with some new technology, just like we did in the industrial era, just like we did when we moved from horses to cars. And that I would benefit from the conversation being a little broadened to not just bona fide businesses that are corporate, but also those independent businesses like myself, because I'm a writer, I'm a coach, I'm a facilitator. I don't see AI as the big bad boogeyman as much as some other jobs that may be having to adjust or be retrained or eliminated. So I think there is a healthy amount of concern, but I'd really like to have it broadened to many different sectors, because I think each sector is going to have a different challenge and a different opportunity.
Yeah, so well said. Yeah, and just so you know, I'm a huge optimist as well. I think that the technology is here to stay for sure, and it definitely has, you know, and we've already seen some incredible benefits from it. But at the same time, I think that the human technology is possibly the one that's in need for an upgrade. So that's what we're here to find out about. But thank you. Yeah, great perspective. Anyone else? Something from Samantha. My company works a lot with AI tools, and there's a center on productivity. But I think sometimes with the ability to have more work product, we burn out than the workforce. Then we burn out the workforce faster. And I worry about culture from the increase of AI adaptability. Yeah, great point there, Samantha. If you wanted to, come on and elaborate a little bit more, feel free to. But yeah, that's an interesting tension, where it brings the productivity gains, it brings the speed with it, but it also then, ironically, makes us busier, and it makes some of those tension points in the culture a little bit more visible, and sometimes a little harder to manage. I suppose that's the future for you.
Yeah, I think the main thing that I'm noticing is that while there's always more work to be done with AI, it's like, oh, we can get it done faster, we can get it done, more efficiently. And it's like, well, then there's more room for more work. And that's where we have the what I call the chain of screaming at a certain point, and where you're just constantly in a cycle. So trying to make sure we're balancing for our employees, and I work in HR, so I worry about that from a burnout and people like there's a word for it and I can't remember what it is right now, but just losing people to that, as opposed to the real fear of AI itself. Yeah,
I saw a term that a friend of mine used, and he called it quiet cracking, as opposed to quiet quitting.
Yeah,
and perhaps that's something similar to what you had in mind.
yeah, I think turnover rates are really in the mind of us right now as companies and corporate and whatever else, but just making sure that we're having a balance, which I think with AI is increasingly more difficult to achieve.
At the same time, what Sarah's going to continue with in a moment is going to be pretty much our kind of the beginning of our answer to the question, which is the answer is not so much in how to change or manipulate the technology, but how to curate the environment in which people do that work, which is the culture. and which is starting with the assumption that culture is something that can be changed, and it can be something that benefits from everyone in the conversation in a really guided way. Yeah, so yeah, good input. Thank you. Any other voices? It's a big question, isn't it? Well, maybe at this point, Sarah, it makes sense to continue if you want to share your screen, because I think from this it goes quite nicely into the rest of what we wanted to talk about.
Yes, yeah. And Sharon, I just want to not hide the ball here in that this is a little the rest of our conversation is going to be a little bit more focused on corporate culture as opposed to individual culture. And I hope that there's some mindset and techniques that you yourself, as a small business owner, will be able to take as useful. But I just want to just check in with you on that.
Thank you for that consideration. I'm totally fine.
Great, thank you. So here's what our earliest career employees tell us when we ask them the question, what does it take for you to trust your employer? And when you look at these statements, it's not rocket science, is it? They're not asking for a bunch more engagement, but what they are asking is for something that's a lot more precise, and that's consistency. Do you do what you say you're going to do? And this is probably one of the first generations who, writ large, do not necessarily trust the system as much as past generations. And so, in that regard, the concept of trust in employers is the baseline is a little bit different from what we're used to. And this has implications for us in terms of the way that trust is created between employer and employee, how our leaders show up, and how we get stuff done. And in other words, our corporate culture. And what I want to just share back with you is we speak with a lot of business leaders about culture, and sometimes it comes across as a little soft. People maybe talk about values posters, maybe how the mood of the organization, or some great offsites that they've done to embed the values. And it's not that those things aren't important, but in some ways it's not really taking into account the magnitude of what culture looks like in organizations. And our definition is on the second half of the page here. So it's how trust moves through the organization, how decisions are made, how risks are handled, what stories get celebrated, and in turn, how company performance compounds over time. And so, this is a given. You can influence it, you can be intentional about it, but it is what we have right now. And so, the question really is do we have a company culture that can support and operate productively in this ever increasingly complex world that we're operating in? And so I always listen for sort of the why now. And the reality is that we're layering AI on top of the system that you have right now. Whatever your company culture is, and you've got an AI strategy, the corporate system is not going to change. The AI is new, but you're layering that on some existing foundations. And what we're seeing is, unfortunately, we've got a mismatch between the ability or the speed with which we can scale trust, a mismatch with how quickly we're scaling our AI strategies. And whether we like it or not, that mismatch is going to create some friction points. And that's what we think is an important frame for business leaders to be talking about is, how do we scale trust in a way such that our employees feel that we're not hiding the ball, not being lacking in transparent, not making the environment either too pessimistic or too optimistic. How do we do that? The challenge for this right now is the amount of complexity our organizations are dealing with. And I'll just quickly run us through the Kinefin framework. I'm sure many of you are familiar with it. David Snowden, it's been around a while. Let me just quickly orient you to it and explain what one of our theses is that we want to test with you today. So simple environments where cause equals effect tend to and decisions are fairly simple, tend to lend themselves well to policies, standard operating procedures. A complicated environment, cause still equals effect, but I might not know the answer to that. I might need to hire, an expert in this particular area in order to understand how cause equals effect. But the world is still the world of knowable. I sometimes think of it, so when I switch on the light, I know the light's going to come on, but please don't ask me to explain how the light comes on. But my husband, who's an electrical engineer and physicist, will be able to do that for you. And so that would be an example of where the world of the complicated, typically where expertise is brought to bear to help get to the right outcome. But where we are currently is the world of the complex. And this is really a little bit the world of the unknown. And Sharon, your point earlier around, optimist, optimist, I think is interesting, because in some ways, embracing the fact that we don't know gives us an opportunity to really unleash our growth mindset, dial up our curiosity, and try to figure this out. And the approaches that work best in complex environments are what we call outside-in thinking. This is where we're sort of looking for patterns. Linsky and Heifetz famously say, get up on the balcony and look down on the dance floor to see the different patterns of dancing that you see. Similarly, in our complex environment with AI being placed on top of existing complex company culture systems, we should be experimenting. We should be seeing what is working in other parts, other organizations, other industries outside of our own. And we should be adopting a much more structured, disciplined experimentation approach. But unfortunately, all too often, we see organizations doing to the contrary. They're, when the uncertainty, the complexity, the ambiguity increases, control is amplified. So you get more alignment, more processes, more approvals, more messaging. Whereas the inverse approach is actually what the theory tells us that we should be doing, is more experimentation, more setting of hypotheses and testing whether our ideas are going to, yield fruit, yield information that allow us to set the course more clearly. And this is the challenge at hand, is we cannot control our way in a complex environment. We can learn our way through it. And that's what we want to do with you guys today. So it's not about how do we get more aligned, but it's how do we run better experiments. Alex, let me just bring you in here. Anything that you'd like to add or
Yeah, beautifully said. It's such an important point. So I almost want to kind of just restate it in a way, because this is such a central part of what we're kind of gearing up at CultureOS, because just like Sarah said, when there's more uncertainty, when there's an elevated risk that is perceived by an organization, Of course, the corporate immune system wants to try and control that. It wants to lessen the damage. It wants to diminish those effects of what that uncertainty might bring. We're saying that because we're operating in complex environments where the outcomes cannot be known, that's what uncertainty means. We cannot be certain on some of those things, those exponential kind of factors that are out there. AI is obviously the leading example of that. It requires us to adopt a different approach where we can't insist on knowing the outcome from the start. We have to experiment and learn our way through it in order to determine not just what those outcomes are, but also what are the preferred outcomes? What are the things that we actually don't know yet that we should know? And that is really the DNA of what we're all about and what we'll get into shortly.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Alex. So what we're going to do with the remainder of our time is break out into a couple of small groups, and we're going to design an experiment. We're going to design an experiment that can probably be tested in a couple of weeks in your environment. It could be in your own business. It could be in a client business, in a community that you're a part of. But what could be one experiment that you design that would allow you to increase trust in your AI approach? So the goal here would be to name what's happening today, to name what we want instead, to talk about how we might try to generate data on that point, and then how would we measure what we've observed. So what's going on today? What do we want to happen that's different? How might we do something differently to achieve that objective? And how would we measure it? So here's an example that I pulled together. So we want this to be testable in a couple of weeks. One current behavior could be in a company uncertainty about job impact. We want to get better clarity on how and why decisions on role changes are made in organizations. So we could experiment in terms of mapping, okay, which tasks have been automated, which tasks are potentially evolving or under consideration, and where might this be in the future? Not in a sort of World Economic Forum type way, but in a what's happening inside our organization. And then the check or the measure could be how many of the team understand how their role might change in the future. So that would be an example of the type of structure that we'd love you just to brainstorm in a small group. Alex and I will sit. Ellie, if you can split us up, pop Alex in with one group, me in with another. Let's just take maybe 10 minutes or so. Alex, does that sound about right in terms of time? And see what we come up with. Hey guys, so welcome back. Alex, how did you and your group get on?
I think it went pretty well. We were talking a little bit about some possible ideas for experiments that Samantha could run within her business. And I think that there was some good ideas given there. Some things I'm happy to also say that it sounds like her and her team have actually tried as well. But yeah, always room for a couple of new things to experiment with and see how they go. So I think it was a good conversation. Thanks, guys. Thanks for applying yourselves to it.
Yeah, we had a good conversation too. We sort of narrowed down on a couple of different experiments that Mira could try. There's the challenge of it speeds up exponentially the work, and at the same time there is still checking and validating and cross-referencing, and that sometimes that work isn't necessarily captured. And because the magnitude of the tasks is so dramatically changed, that sometimes gets lost in the mix, and that could create a business case challenge if that additional work is not quantified and validated. And then poor Mira had a nasty shock recently where an AI prompt started to impact her desktop and change work that was outside of the boundaries of the request. And so we talked about maybe documenting cases of where that is across the business so that we can start to understand and put in place guardrails to create a safer environment. Mira, did I capture those two things?
Yes, you said everything perfectly. I will just add that it is easier when you are senior or expert to check AI, but when you are like starting your career, it can be like difficult to give him the right prompt, what do you want, and to know where to start actually. So instead of saving time, it can be like you can be lost and losing time, giving him a lot of prompts, not going anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Yeah, precisely. I know that we're nearly at time, everyone. The hour has passed really, really fast. And I think that if anything, this is probably just the end of the beginning of the conversation, because there's so much to cover, right? But I know that Sarah and I are hopeful that kind of what we've shared today is something that is, if it's not new information, it's definitely maybe a little bit of motivation, maybe a bit of impetus to don't just leave our discussion and some of the ideas we discussed today just, on the table, but rather run it and try it. Try a couple of different experiments. As we said in our room, you don't know what the outcome is until you try it and see, well, maybe we run another experiment. Maybe we change it. Maybe we do it this way. The point is not so much the experiment itself, but what comes with embracing a culture of experimentation. And that's very much what we're, not just starting out today with, but really how we're aiming to empower more and more organizations around the world with a simple but a bold way of pretty much rejigging their cultural system from the inside out. So if you've not had a chance yet, please check us out on CultureOS. We've got the ability to book in a call with us as well. We're also going to have a kind of a downloadable PDF, which is going to be a little bit, more detail on what we covered today. That'll be with you, and we'll make sure you get that in the coming days as well. And we'd love to continue to stay in touch with you, to hear from you, because like we said at the beginning, this is hopefully the beginning of a movement, and we'd love voices like yours, each of you, to be part of it as well. So thank you very much for joining today. Sarah,
Thanks,
any
guys.
words?
No, in terms of the care package that will be sent out after, we'll share the recording. We'll share a little field guide if you want to put in place some of these experiments in your own organization. And we've done a bit of brainstorming around AI experiments that can help scale trust, just sort of expanding a little bit the short 10 minutes that we had on the phone today. And so that will also be in the package and hopefully will be helpful if you're choosing to take this idea moving forward. So thanks, guys. Been such a pleasure.
Thank you.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Thank you to you too.
Take
Good
care,
day,
everyone.
everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye now.
Okay.